As is often the case here on the farm and in the workshop, as you've seen, when something needs fixing, I often have to fix 4 or 5 other things, several other things at least, before I can fix the thing I'm trying to fix. And that's the case here. I'm trying to fix the freezing problem with the water up there at the rental retreat, and I need to dig a footing for a new little lean-to shed thing that I'm going to put on the side of the house that I can insulate and even heat and never have a problem with the water freezing again. Well, in order to do that, I have to dig that little footing, and it's not very big. It's only going to be maybe 3 feet out and maybe 6 or 8 feet long. So I could dig it with a shovel and a pick, except for 2 factors. Number one, I'm eat up with arthritis, so digging isn't my funnest thing to do. And second of all, on top of that, this ground is basically solid rock. It's just, you know, gravel and flint and limestone rocks everywhere. And I mean everywhere. You could not stick a knife in the ground anywhere out here, and I promise you this is true, without hitting a rock. So, I mean, it's just rock, solid rock. You very rarely ever get stuck out here in terms of like in the mud, because it's just rock. Okay, having said that, digging is not fun. So I've got this backhoe attachment for my Bobcat. Now this Bobcat here is a T300. It is not designed, as far as I know, to have a backhoe attachment. There are some kind of quasi attachments you can get for the front, like where you attach, that kind of operate with the arms, but it's not a real backhoe, so to speak. This is pretty much a real backhoe, but it just attaches to the front of a normal, skid steer Bobcat. And it worked on my previous 2 Bobcats, but this Bobcat's much bigger and it doesn't work. The problem is, when you tilt it back, this arm here is supposed to lock into a bracket. And the bracket was actually on the fenders of the old Bobcats. And the fenders were real thick, heavy, like 1/2-inch steel. So it's not like normal steel, normal fenders. But anyway, these would lock into that and keep this part from pulling forward as you are dragging the bucket. Well, there's nothing to lock it into, and in fact, this is so wide, this won't even come past it. It hits it right here. So, first of all, let me just say the big caveat. Do not try this at home. This is a dangerous thing that I'm about to do. Modifying a piece of engineered equipment like this can get you killed. I know that. I know that up front. I absolutely understand the risk. I also know that I'm going to build this thing if it works, and I'm going to build in some additional safety factors like some safety chains or something like that, that if what I build breaks, that the chains will help catch it and hopefully help keep from getting hurt, So anyway, I'm going to build in some additional safety features, but having said that, this is a dangerous thing. I would not recommend it to anybody to do this. As I said, this is a T300 Bobcat, and this is a 607 backhoe attachment. They aren't designed to go together, but I am going to do my best to make these 2 things work. Granted, I could sell this thing and, get a lot of my money back, there's no question. After I modify it, it's not sellable. I know that, so I could be losing a lot of money here. But I also know I need a backhoe attachment here, and I don't want to go out and buy a whole backhoe and all that stuff. If I can modify this to make it work, this will be plenty good for my purposes around here. I don't use them all the time. When I need it, I need it. So having said that, that's the way I'm approaching it. I know the risks, and I'm still going to try to make this work. Honestly, I don't know how I'm going to make it work, but I'm going to do my doggone best. We'll see. I'll bring you along for the ride. Again, the lighting situation is not ideal, and as I mentioned, the electric is off. So, as a matter of fact, the electric company is here now. But I think this will show you the angle of the problem better. These arms rotate back and they lock in down here is where they normally lock in. But this is the lift arm, and this rotating back is going to hit the lift arm. So that's the problem. I'm going to have to modify this in a way where it will get past this and then find a way to lock it in down here. I don't know if I can lock it in on the lift arm. I think I can. I don't know why I couldn't do that. The only problem with that might be lifting the whole unit up in the air. I don't see how that would hurt it though. I mean, you can't really lift this. Once you get this on here, it's locked in. Yeah, you can't really lift it. If I did lock it in here, you could lift it, and that might actually be kind of helpful. So I don't know. I think I'm going to try to mount it to this lift arm. That may be the wrong idea, but that makes the most sense for the design of my problem here. So we'll see how it goes. Well, my friends, what I did was I cut out a section of this. This used to go right here, and I cut it right here, and I cut it along here, and basically about an inch narrower across here. So there's about 2 inches more width here, which is across the front of this thing, which is about the extra width that I need to get around those arms. At least that's what I think. I'm going to mock this all back up and get a tape measure and check it out. But right now, my plan is, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a pin right here, goes in this hole, and now I can't get it out, of course, on camera. But this pin right here used to go through this full length. Now I'm going to make the pin just go through this smaller area, and we're still going to use this pin, but it's just going to be a smaller section. And in actuality, that'll make this pin stronger because it's not spanning such a big distance. So from that standpoint, it should be just as strong as it ever was. But anyway, it's just going to be complicated. So I've got to do a lot of mock-up here, and then I'm going to weld all this back and fill this back in, and hopefully it'll be seriously as strong as it ever was, probably stronger. Where the weak point will be how I attach this back to the arm. And that part there I have to build from scratch, and I have to make that very, very strong. Because this part here will be plenty strong. I'm not worried about this part. We'll see how it goes. I think you can see I did a pretty nice job there. You know, I'm not the best vertical welder in the world, but I did a pretty good job on that. I think that's a good, solid, steady weld all the way down through there. Not quite like stacking dimes on a vertical weld, but it's not too bad. A little better than your average farm weld, I guess you'd say. But anyway, it's really solid. I put the pin back in and cut the pin off, so now everything's flush here. There should just be, like, seriously, like an 1/8 of an inch clearance for this thing to go around the Bobcat. That's not much clearance, but it seems to be enough because I've done it already and it seemed to work. So anyway, all I can say is I hope it works now that I've got it welded up. We'll find out here in a little bit. I've got the other side done also. I'll just show you quickly that side. On this side, I have not cut the pin off yet, as you can tell, but it's also welded. I didn't clean it off yet, so I think it welded really well. In fact, it was the second one, so it's probably a little better weld even than the first one because I had a little practice that way. But it turned out real nice. I'm very happy with it. I think it's very strong. For those who are really engineers and critical about things, and I'm aware of this myself, is that this used to pull straight in line with this. Now it's got a 90-degree offset. So when this pulls this way now it's kind of like a hinge. That could have weakened this joint right here a little bit. And so what I think I'll do, after I know it all fits up, is I think I'll take another piece of steel and put it across this at a 45 and weld it on both sides, and that should make it more than strong enough. I'll evaluate that. You know, if I think there's even the least bit need for it, I will put a 45 across there, and that will for sure make it as strong, probably stronger than it ever was. Well, the good news is that it does fit. I was trying to make it wide enough to go around this, and you can see it's there. The other side, of course, has to be there or it wouldn't even be there. So it is a very tight, snug fit. No question about it. Even is so tight that it even matters how you line up the attachment plate down there. You have to get it just right. And, you know, that's okay. I mean, I don't use this every day. And if it takes me, you know, 5 minutes to hook it up, it's worth 5 minutes, you know, as long as I can make the rest of it work. Now I have to figure out a way to attach this to the machine and make it solid. And I'm a little concerned about that. but at least I've got step 1 done, and now I'll figure out how to do step 2. Well, my friends, I'm happy with the way all this has turned out. I've hooked this thing up to the Bobcat 4 or 5 times. It fits, so all that's good. The problem is, I thought I could make me a big hook like this. Now, this was just a prototype. This is 3/4 inch thick steel, and it was going to hook on that thing right there. This was going to be attached to the Bobcat, and the only place reasonable without going completely crazy and building a lot of steel out, the only place reasonable was to attach it to the actual arm. Well, after figuring that out, that ain't going to work, because you can't hook this to the arm and then, let this down on the hook. It just doesn't work, because I can't raise and tilt both by hooking it to the arm. I can only tilt. That won't drop it down on this hook. Like if I had this hook fastened here, I couldn't drop this down to hook it on there. So bottom line is, this technology isn't going to work with my new setup. It could work, but it would take a ton of work to build out the metal and everything that I would need, and then it would be so far out, sticking out on the Bobcat, that I think it would be in the way, and this would be ugly. So I've got a new idea, and there are 2 holes in the arms of the Bobcat that are built into the Bobcat. They're great big round holes, and they're about 6 inches deep. And I've got a pin here that fits the hole pretty darn well. And what I'm saying is, I'm just going to tear this whole thing off here, put big heavy steel here, and have a hole through it that lines up with that hole. And it won't be easy to line it up, don't get me wrong, it won't be an easy hookup. But if I can get this through there and get it in the hole and then just retain this in there, there ain't nothing going to break that. So, I mean, they've only got a 1-inch pin, and this has got to be 2 inches at least. That's my new way of hooking it up. It's not going to be pretty, but it should work. So, I checked both sides, and they both line up with that hole really well. If I can make one side work, then the other side, if I build it exactly the same, it should work. So that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be a lot of tear out and rebuild, but I don't know anything else to do. I just got to get after it. So here we go. You can probably see that I've cut away a big chunk of this area here, and I've made these pins that fit these holes really tight. They go in there several inches. They go in there that deep. And then they're going to stick through. I'm going to put steel plates on here with holes on it, and it'll be a plate on both sides with a hole in it, and this pin will go straight through. Now, it's not going to be easy to line up, but it's the only option I can come up with that makes any sense at this point, because way back under here is where it needs to be attached, and I can't attach it there. So that's the only obvious attachment point. That's all I got accomplished today. I did both sides. Both sides are identical. That's about all I've got done today, and I really have worked on it a long time. I had to turn those pins down to fit the holes nice. There's a little play, but I wanted a little play. I didn't want them to be perfectly tight, because it'd never get them in there. But even with a little bit of play, and I'm saying maybe 20 thousandths play, if that, maybe 10, 20 thousandths. So I'm hoping that's going to work, and that may even be too tight, but we'll see. I'll have to have a way to retain the pin in there from the other part, from the attachment. It'll keep the pin from sliding out. The width of this will keep the pin in there, so I'm not too worried about that part, but it's just that I will have to have a deal to hold that in there. Oh well, it's getting there. Just not a simple process, but I'll figure it out eventually. Well, success. Both pins are in the holes and they're lined up. This square tubing ended up being just a tool I'm using to align this. The square tubing itself is not nearly heavy enough, strong enough to hold this, but I'm going to build a heavy frame around it. This was just there for me to prototype it and get it aligned. The pins are driven about halfway in. These pins are going to be hard to get out, so I'm going to tap a large threaded bolt on here and put a puller on there where we can pull them out if we need to. With a little wiggling back and forth, I'm sure these will come out. It might take a two-person job to hook this thing up. But you know, even that is better than not using the thing. You know, it ain't perfect. I'm not in high production here. This is just something I'm doing to save my back and my arthritic hands from digging in this hard dirt. And I do think this is going to work just fine. If you get back a little further and look at it, it's pretty level the way it's sitting on there. That's what you want. It may be tilted a little bit forward when I drop the arms down some more, because the arms will drop down a little bit. But overall, I think we're in pretty good shape. So now I'm going to get to reinforcing that and welding all that heavy metal around those square tubings. And I need to do that before my prototype gets pulled off of there from the weight, because this thing sags forward. So I got to get busy. Here's a look at it from the opposite side, from the inside, I guess you'd say. And you can see how I filled that in and welded it back and welded around. I also welded the inside seams, so it's welded pretty solid. That's just a beginning though. I've still got a lot more to go. And here's a look at the other side to see the difference. There's a lot of sun out here and I think it's blocking out the camera, so I'm trying to, maybe it'll lighten up if I can block out some of that light. I think you can see it at least. A lot more work to do. I'll show you more progress as I get along. This is definitely not a video on how to weld, but I do have this piece in here and I'll go ahead and weld this up. I am not a quote-unquote welder. I'm a quote-unquote self-taught about 50 years ago welder, something like that. Maybe even a little longer than that now that I think about it. I've been welding since I was probably about 13 or 14. So anyway, you know, it's all totally self-taught though. All I know is what I do. You know, a little bit I've learned off of YouTube. This piece is just sitting in there. It's sitting in there real tight. I cut it to fit the hole and it holds itself in place. So I'm going to go ahead and tack it and then weld it. Okay, it's tacked. Now I'll just weld it up solid. Well, I welded it all the way around and around the tube on both sides, so that ought to hold. Try to give you a close-up look at my weld, because I know a lot of people like to see that sort of thing, even though, like I said, this is not a how-to welding video. And you can see it there, dusty. Let me clean it off. Not a bad-looking weld for a farmer, you know. It's solid. It sort of looks like dimes going up through there, a little bit runny, but I'm not a good vertical welder at all. Get it on flat weld and I'm pretty good at that, but this is about the best I can do on the vertical. I'm sure many of you welders out there could do much better. I have the thing all welded up. I put a full half-inch thick plate on the back here, but I've only tacked it in place. Basically, I'm fighting the hurry up and screw up urge. Once I put that plate on there, that makes it pretty permanent. So, you know, I can still adjust it a little bit, not very easily, but I could adjust it before that plate gets on there. Once that plate's on there, it's pretty much a done deal. So I think it's strong enough though to do a dry run test, not do any digging, but to just make sure everything's going to work and function. So that's our next step. Well, I have those real large pins hooked in my lathe presently, and I've already drilled this one. I thought I'd just show you briefly how you can drill these big pins like this and get the bore perfectly centered. I already center drilled it, and I have started boring this one, in fact. And you slow your lathe down and you just put plenty of oil on there. I've got marked on the bit how deep I want to go. And you just screw it in and it just drills it dead center. It works really, really well. I don't get in any big hurry. This is a small lathe, so you can't push it too hard. but it'll do some real work if you just take your time. I'm going to thread it to a 1/2 inch 13, so that's a pretty common thread, and that will end up being my handle if I can't get the pin out. I can put a bolt in there and be able to pull on that bolt if I have any trouble getting the pins out. But once you get them in there, you better have a way to get them out. Just put a little oil on the thing there, go in and out a little bit. Just, it's a real sharp new drill bit, so it's drilling really easy actually. And there's my depth right there. So I'll just clean that off and run the bit in one more time to depth, just to clean out any junk that's in there. That should do it. You can see how perfectly it does that. Really does a nice job. This is the little metal lathe, a combination lathe and mill from Grizzly. The mill is up above here that you can barely see in the picture. It swings out of the way. It's a combo lathe mill. Just about the perfect fit for my farm here. Admittedly, I'd like to have a bigger lathe and a bigger mill, but you know, this gets me by. So now we're going to thread this. This machine, I wouldn't feel comfortable threading it with power, but now that I just said that, I do feel comfortable starting it on here, and I shouldn't have taken it out. I should have left it right in there, but you know me, I'm on camera and I wasn't thinking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to force the drill bit back in there before I tighten up the chuck, and then I'll just tighten up the chuck here. That gets me close enough to on center. It might not be perfect as it was, but it's pretty close. Closer than you could do it by hand, let's just say it that way. So now I'll get my tap and put it in the chuck here. They make all kinds of specialty tools for tapping on the lathe with a spring follower here. I don't have the spring follower, so I just have to keep tightening up my tail thing there. I put my key back in the chuck just so I can hold it better, get a little leverage. But this all lines up this way. There's a bevel in the end of that tap that keeps it all straight. Or it should anyway. Once you get it going pretty good, you can take it out and put it in a vise or something, and it's a little easier, or you can just continue to do it right here on the lathe. Once it gets going, it's pretty well staying straight after that. I like to back up pretty often because that backing up cuts the little burr off and keeps it from tearing the thread out. A lot of guys just keep going, and that works, but sometimes you can tear your thread out. I've had very good luck backing up, and I don't break any taps. Matter of fact, I think I've only broke one tap off in my whole life. Been tapping ever since I was a kid, really. Okay, so I can kind of get this out of my way. I feel like I'm in there deep enough that I can just continue it by hand. It's a pretty hard one to do because it's a big thread. And I would actually be better doing it in a vise. I'm going to see if my big tap wrench will work on this, but I don't think it'll spin. I don't think it's going to spin here. No, it'll hit the bed. So I'm going to take this out and just put it in a vise. It'll be easier for me. All right, I've got her in the vise here. I've got boards and things on both sides of the workpiece, so it doesn't scratch it up. I've got, boards on both sides there in the vise. I go about a quarter turn and then I back up. Gonna get the oil here. It's nice to keep the oil on it. It's a little slower process tapping this way, but it gives me good results, and like I said, I don't break any taps off, or I haven't. Shouldn't say that on camera. This was the way I was taught to do it, I think, in school many years ago. But I actually started tapping before I got in school. Back it up a little bit. I'm going fairly deep. I'm going about 1 inch deep or so. I don't have a bottoming tap, but that should give me more than enough threads. I think I might have hit the bottom there. I'm not sure. No, I don't think so. Oh, I think I did then. Okay, well, I took it out of the vise there. I blew the threads out with air, and I have a grade 5 bolt, which is plenty strong for our purposes because we're not doing anything that really requires strength on this. This is just to pull this out of the hole and to retain it. I'm going to put a thing on here with another bolt to keep this in the hole so it doesn't come out automatically, or on its own, I should say. It seems to be going in there pretty good. This bolt might be used. I'm going to double check it again and make sure that it's going all the way to the bottom. I don't think it is, but we'll work on that off camera. I know this isn't a very good picture because of the washout, but that's besides the point. I got to do what I got to do. I'm going to go ahead and hook this thing up. I'm going to leave the camera roll so you can see the iterations I have to go through to hook it up. And then we're going to take it outside and see if we can make it function. That's before I do the final welding here because I want to make sure it's going to at least work before I do the very last thing. Here we go.
I moved for you, darling. I can't try to pretend I'm not, 'cause I move all over again. They say time will heal. Time only makes me wish you were near. I try to stop thinking of you, but every little thing I do makes me wish and dream of you. I'm blue all over again.
I don't know if you can hear me, but it's all hooked up already. Everything's done. All I had to do is drive in those 2 bolts. Now they're not retained, so this is just a prototype test. Well, technically I lied. It's not completely hooked up. I got to hook up the 2 hydraulic lines. Those are easy, so here's that.
I'm blue for you, darling. I can't try to pretend.
Well, there's my first unforeseen problem. My second hydraulic hose is just about 4 inches too short, 5 inches too short. Bummer. I didn't anticipate that. I knew this was actually short on the other Bobcat, so I mean it was tight. I'm kind of surprised it's short because it seems like everything should be about the same, but it is. It's about 4 inches short. Let me double check and make sure it's not just kinked up in here somewhere. Actually about 2.5 inches short. I'm going to look at it and see if there's an option here. Otherwise I'm going to have to get another hose before I can do a test. Well, I'll be truthful. That was a little disappointing. First of all, that the hose was just a little short. I didn't expect that. I really didn't think that was going to be an issue. But it was, like that much too short. Very minimal. So I'll just have to have a new hose made. The connection points worked really well, actually. They were a little hard getting them in, although I think that was just me doing it by myself. To get them out, I thought I'll never get them out. They didn't feel like they were going to come. But I just screwed this into the end there where I put those threads and just hammered it out like that. And when I wiggled the controls a little bit, they just popped right out. No problem at all. So in and out isn't going to be a big issue, I don't think. Hooking it up isn't really that big of a deal. So with that in mind, I think I'm going to go ahead now and just weld it all up solid and finish that part up, and then I'll clean up, go to the store, and get me a hose made up. And I think I'm done with this puppy. It's the next day, and I have everything finished. The hose is connected up. I got the new hose. You can kind of see the shiny fitting there. Kind of right there. The shiny fitting. That's the new hose. The connections right here have been made so that that retainer is on there now. Those pins cannot come out. You can see I've got a 1/4-inch strap piece of steel there holding the pins in. Take a lot to pull those pins out, trust me. I've got everything else ready to go. I wanted to point out that this thing says rental on it. It is not a rental. I bought it from Bobcat. It was one of their rental units. I got a good deal on it, and I've owned it for 10 or 15 years. They know I have it, obviously, and they came out and put the new safety bars on it. Those 2 bars that you can see that are cut off there, those were the original safety bars. The bars that are up here, these loops, they are much lower than they used to be. My guess is someone probably got pulled into those things and probably got killed, and so they made those much lower and safer. Bobcat actually came out, that was a recall, and they came out and actually changed that. So my point is, I just wanted to point out to you, in case anybody thinks I stole a rental unit, redid all this work to it. No, this is definitely owned by me. Bobcat knows I have it, and they've got my serial numbers, the whole bit. So I'm good with that. But anyway, all that to say, I think we're completely finished. So I'm going to take it out here in the driveway and just do a dry run. I'm not going to actually dig. I'm just going to make sure everything functions. So let's see what that looks like. Well, I couldn't be much happier with that. Oh my gosh, feels just like it used to. All the fit is perfect. It just fits up absolutely wonderful. I think that's as strong as it ever was, probably stronger. I'm happy. I mean, it's just like awesome to be able to finally get this thing working again. That is awesome. Having said that, it works great. I still wouldn't recommend anybody do this on their own. It is a very dangerous thing. It could definitely cause death, because we're modifying a piece of equipment that was engineered. But I do feel like I'm qualified to, to work and do these kinds of things, and I'm, willing to take that calculated risk. But if you aren't familiar with doing this kind of a renovation to equipment or changing of equipment, then I wouldn't recommend it at all. I am so happy and so pumped that this worked great.
Every time you're not around, I'm by myself, I get to feeling down. If someone calls out your name, well, I get to think another day's gone by. You were standing by my side, I'm blue all over again. I'm blue for you, darling. I can't try to pretend I'm not, 'cause I'm blue all over I'm blue all over again. I'm blue for you, darling. I can't try to pretend I'm not, 'cause I'm blue all over again. I can't try to pretend I'm not, 'cause I'm blue all over again.
Well, as always, my friends, I show you the whole truth. You saw me hit the house twice, actually. The new thing works great, don't get me wrong, but it is much more touchy, much faster than it used to be. And I'm sure that's all due to the bigger flow hydraulics on this Bobcat. But it works great. I wish I would have been able to practice with it a little bit. I probably should have. But, no real damage done over there. I did kind of bust a little bit of the sill board down there on the floor, but that's not a big deal. You know me with wood, I can fix that. I can patch a little piece of wood in there if I need to. it's not even really serious enough to worry about it. I did actually bump the upright stack, but I don't think it created enough damage there to create any problem. So, I mean, it didn't crack it or anything as far as I can tell. Chipped just a little bit of the lip off of the bottom of that one connector, but not enough to really care too much about. I'm really overall very happy with it. You know, that saved a lot of digging. You can see the amount of dirt there piled out in just a couple of minutes. You know, it's just awesome. And that's really hard digging too. And even that, there's a lot of big rock in that, bigger than you think, but it's also that real sticky clay, which is a real pain to dig. So anyway, that's going to be about it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching.